Hello. So I'm here to make a video. I've had a lot of people ask me this question, and so I wanted to talk a little bit about creating public pagan rituals, so that people would have an idea how to do that. Now, the first thing that you want to do is gauge your audience. How large is your audience for first of all? If this is your first time doing this, try to keep it under 20 people. That's my best suggestion because if you've never done it before, you don't want mass chaos in your ritual space. If you're a veteran, I've seen people host rituals with upwards of 100 people, and it's been successful. But for example, the pagan pride last weekend in Raleigh, North Carolina, they have an average attendance, I think, of about 1,500 people over 2 days. And they create some pretty, well, sometimes good rituals for that space, and it's large groups of people. Sometimes you can have 50, 60 people gathering at one time during a ritual. I was also back in March of 2008. Oberon Zell came to Chicago when I was working with the Earth Spiritualists of Chicago, and they basically had about, I think, 75 or 80 people within that ritual space. So I've been to some big successful rituals, but if it's your first time doing it, stick to under 20 people just to save yourself a headache. Now, of course, sometimes we can't completely control how many people show up to the ritual, especially if it's completely public. But of course, you can always gauge how many people are going to show up and how much chaos you're going to have to deal with. Um, some of the great ways to do that is to set up an online RSVP. Facebook has, event status, and everybody's using Facebook nowadays. So if I were you, I would create a ritual on a site like Facebook and tell people if they plan to come to the ritual, please RSVP. So that way you can gauge how many people are going to come. Now, one of the wonderful things about pagans is they're very spontaneous, and some people are not going to RSVP and just show up. Expect that. Don't be upset. Just expect it. And basically the RSVP, what it does is it gives you a way to gauge a good roundabout figure of how many people are going to show up to your ritual. Now, the next thing you want to do is make sure that you have enough volunteers for your ritual. It's very, very hard, no matter what the size of the people coming, to organize a ritual completely by yourself. You're always going to want to have a couple people who are your right and left hand people that are going to be able to help you, if not more, depending on the size of your ritual. Um, and there's various activities that these people are going to do, and we'll get to that in a moment. But the main thing that I want to focus on right now is how it is that you procure your volunteers. The first thing you want to do is try to get your friends, your family, and if you have a coven or a group, those people involved first, because you can trust those people the most, and you can gauge who you can trust and who you can't, and what their capabilities are. And so you have to make sure that you put people in the right spots for their, volunteer activities as well. But those are the first people that you want to make sure that you get. Now, if you don't have enough people, or if you don't have a group, or your friends and family are not supportive, don't worry, because there's other groups and other people that you could reach out to. If there's another group in the area and your group wants to host a ritual, um, and theirs does too, you can always say, hey, do you guys want some ritual volunteers? We'll volunteer for your ritual if you volunteer for ours. And quid pro quo works wonderfully. And there's other things you can do as well. Just a point of etiquette, when people volunteer for you, please make sure to give them credit. When you're announcing the ritual after other people got there, just take a moment to say, hey, and I wanted to say thanks to such and such group or such and such person that came and helped me today. Make sure to promote their events if they're having one. Say, hey, next weekend they're doing something at this park or something like that. Please make sure to attend. Um, don't try to make when you're planning a ritual, it's not about you. It's about the gods. It's about nature, and it's about creating community. So please don't try to make it all about you. You know what I mean? There's people who do that, who create rituals and put things together so they can order people around and get glory for themselves. And I personally can't stand those people. Um, be gracious, be a gracious host, and remember that as a minister, your goal is to take care of people, not to order them around. Another note about your audience: when you're serving food at a ritual, which a lot of people do, you got to have those cakes and ale. Make sure to address all the dietary concerns of the people that might be present. For example, there's going to be vegans and vegetarians that are going to be present. You got to make sure to have some vegan and vegetarian selections. Now, there's always going to be people who are going to want meat too. Make sure to let people know that what you plan on serving. I'm going to have some meat, I'm going to have some vegetarian and vegan selections so that everybody's there. If it's a small group, you might ask for a potluck. That way, people can bring a dish and they've got something they can eat because they brought it. And that way, and if you do that, make sure that people tell you what they put in the food as well, so that other people know. There's also going to be people who are diabetic, people who have gluten-free concerns and things like that. So you want to make sure to address all those people so that everybody's got something they can feel comfortable with. It's about making people feel welcome. Finding ritual space can be one of the most difficult things to do. And there's lots of different things that you can do that can help you find ritual space if you don't have any. The first thing I would suggest is to look in places like parks, especially if the weather's going to be nice. Now, if you're in the northern areas and it's going to be cold, kind of cold up there, a park is probably not going to work for like a Samhain ritual or some late fall ritual. That's really not going to work for you. So you're going to want to find some kind of indoor area, and there's lots of different places you can go to do that. Almost every town in the nation has a community center, and a lot of times that space is open to the public. You want to make sure that your community center knows that what type of ritual, what you plan on doing there, because some community centers let churches in and some do not. Now, they cannot discriminate against your religion, so don't be afraid of that. If they let other churches in, they've got to let you in. If they don't, then you can take them to court. Um, some parks even have indoor areas and stuff as well. I would try to stay away from hotels and banquet facilities because they're usually pretty expensive, but you never know, you might find a deal. If you can't find anything else, that's usually the last thing to do. Also, if you're looking for indoor space, there's pagan shops. If you've got smaller areas, pagan shops is probably one of the first places I would go to look. Some are going to charge you, some won't. But remember, it's beneficial to the pagan shops too to have you there because you're bringing pagans, you're bringing customers into their shop. So that's always a good thing to look for is, if you've got a pagan shop in your area, to bring it there. And of course, you can also advertise your ritual at that pagan shop as well. Now, for groups and stuff like that, you might want to stick to the gymnasiums and stuff like that. But you can also look in museums, libraries, and other places like that for ritual space. Basically the ideas are pretty much endless. One thing I would stay away from: if you're doing a public ritual, I would suggest not doing it in your backyard, and I'll tell you why. You don't know everybody that's going to be there. And, with every group, whatever religion you are, there's going to be some bad apples who are going to be like, hey, can I use the bathroom? They go in your house and they steal your shit. You don't want that. So if you know everybody that's coming to the ritual, go for it. But if you don't put them in your backyard. That's my personal opinion. Another note about ritual space: you want to make sure that whatever ritual space you get is going to be conducive to your ritual. So, in other words, if you've got, like I said, if it's too cold, don't do it outside, unless you can make a big bonfire in the middle, but most places aren't going to let you do that. You also want to make sure that if you are doing a public park or some other public land, that you don't have to purchase insurance to be there because some places are tricky and make you purchase insurance. Another thing you want to remember is, hey, is this going to be a loud space that's going to be interrupted by people? Are we on public park that's very busy? Are we going to get gawkers, hangers on, and stuff like that? I was once doing a Beltane ritual out in front of UIC, which is a school in downtown Chicago. We had people driving by and yelling stuff at us and stuff like that. We were interrupted several times. Um, it wasn't really a very good ritual space because it was too public. Now, no, some places you can go and it can be public and people aren't going to bother you. But on a college, let's be honest, there's going to be people yelling stuff at you, and that's what happened to us. So make sure that whatever space it is that you're familiar with that space and all the interruptions that might happen there. Now, my husband, Priest Christopher, just reminded me of something. One of the great things about this state of North Carolina is that we have a law on the books that says it's illegal for someone to interrupt a public ritual. So, in other words, people can't come and try to disrupt you. And if they do, you can call the police and have them arrested. There's not a law on the books like that in every state, but I would check and see what your rights are, basically, if someone does try to interrupt you in public space. Now, when you're doing your networking and determining who your audience is and things like that, you also might want to determine when the best time to hold your ritual is. What's your audience's restrictions? Do they work on weekends? Do they work at night? You know, when is your ritual gonna be able to assist the most people? you know um and when is it convenient for you, and when can you get space? All these things are things that you need to consider. Now, of course, each type of ritual is usually centered around some sort of sabbat or holiday, holy day, or maybe it's around the full moon, and maybe you want to have it on the actual day. That can be somewhat difficult, but you also have to remember that sometimes people do personal things on the specific day of the ritual, and then they want to go to a public event on that weekend or something like that. All of those things you want to consider. So, the best way to do that is to ask a question. Set up a page on like Facebook or on your website or something like that, and ask people, what kind of rituals do you want to see? When do you want to have them? If you could ask people in person, do so. What would you like to see? And when are you able to attend? Those questions are all important. Another thing you want to do, especially when determining where your space is going to be, is you want to make sure that space is accessible to people. One of the things that always irked me about Chicago Pagan Pride, and they've since changed this, but back when I lived in Chicago, so 2008 and prior years, they had Chicago Pagan Pride all the way out in like bumfuck Egypt, okay? And it was off the main bus. It was off the bus route, and there was no trains or buses that went to that location. Now, if you know anything about pagans in Chicago, most of them don't have cars. Or if they do have a car, they don't really like to drive it. And so it wasn't a very nice location, and it wasn't a location that most people were able to go to. So in picking a location, the people who were planning Pagan Pride in Chicago failed because they didn't meet the needs of their audience. And if you're not meeting the needs of your audience, what is the point of holding the ritual? Now we get to the fun stuff, okay? Now, you've decided that you want to plan a ritual. You know who your audience is, you know what you're going to serve for food and everything like that, but you haven't determined the big thing about the ritual, which is, what are you getting together for? Um, you know, if you're getting together for a certain holiday, that's great, but to plan a ritual, you need a goal. And so the goal of the ritual is what? This largely depends on your timing. So, in other words, what's the season that you're going to be planning this ritual in? Is it a winter solstice ritual? Is it a Samhain or a mid-fall ritual? What's the goal for you getting together? So, say that you're going to be doing a Samhain ritual, okay? Which of course is coming up, and it's a lot of people's favorite holiday. And even though I'm a neo-Hellenist, I do keep Samhain. We do a Rite of Hades in our holiday spectrum, And that's perfectly fine. If you watch some of my other videos on Hellenism, we get into that further. But anyway, if you're doing if you're doing a Samhain ritual, you want to make sure that your ritual goes along with the holiday that you're celebrating. So, for example, there's lots of different things that you can do with Samhain. Some people do like a dumb feast ritual where they bring the food into ritual and everybody sits and they go around the table and drink to their ancestors. It's a great way to get everybody involved in ritual, feeling spiritual at the same time. They get to talk about personal people to them and remember them at that time. That's one thing to do. You can also call on specific deities, like we do a rite of Hades, like I said, and our rite of Hades talks about basically Persephone's transfer from being with her mother to going down and being with her husband, and being that transitional time period. So that's another thing that you can do is you can do your own rite of Hades, or whatever god of death it is that you feel necessary to celebrate at that time. There's lots of different things that you can do, but it's very important that you do determine that ritual goal because that's what you're going to construct your entire ritual around. So after you've determined your ritual goal, you want to then construct a theme for your event that goes in with your goal of your ritual. And all of this is to set an atmosphere, to get people in the mood to, get to that goal for your ritual. So, for example, if you're doing a Samhain ritual, and we're just using this as an example because other than fall equinox, which is a couple days away, um, the next big holiday for most people is Samhain. So, um, if you're going to do a Samhain ritual, you want to make sure that your color theme matches. So it'd be dark, somber colors. Your food should be food of the season. We're talking, if you're doing like the Rite of Hades, we do usually do a lot of things with pomegranates in it because if you know the myth, Persephone ate, I think it's 5 pomegranate seeds, and that of course is the number of change and all that. But anyway, you want to make sure that all of your things that you can control. So in other words, the food and your decorations and everything go along with your theme. And that's one of the reasons why you need all these volunteers. The more that you can plan to have it go along with your theme, like the kind of dark, somber music, some you can get some really good kind of like dark sounding flights pipes. That usually works pretty well. But there's other types of things that you can do depending on what type of ritual it is. But, for Samhain rituals, I think you get the idea of doing sort of a somber theme and something that has to do with the idea of death and contacting the other side of the veil or the other side of the river, as we call it. Now, one thing you want to remember is hospitality, and this is another reason why you have all these volunteers. Now that you've got your ritual space set up and your theme is decorated and everything is set for people to come into your ritual space. So now everybody is ready to come into your event, okay? The first thing that you need to do is you need to make sure that when people come into your event, there are people there to welcome them. Okay, usually one or two people who sits at the front either of the building that you're going to be in, or if you're at a park area that's kind of is on the watch for people who are coming into the area and stops them and says, "Hi, are you here for the ritual? Well, my name is so and so, and this ritual is being run by such and such group or groups, and this is the goal of our ritual today. We're going to be doing a meet and greet, and then we're going to do a little session about where we do a mythology roundtable, and then we're going to go into ritual, and our ritual goal is this." So, the people who are coming in and kind of welcoming people in give people an idea of what to expect from your ritual and event. So that, if they've never been there before, maybe they've never even been to a pagan event before, or maybe they're just pagan curious and they're starting to just make those little steps outside, where they're not really sure if this is for them. And this first event that they go to may make or break their journey into paganism. So remember that, that you're responsible for the people that are there to an extent, and for their enjoyment of their ritual, and that could mean a lot to some people. So make sure that you have one or two people out front, or just on the lookout for people coming into your ritual space, so that they can, greet those people and bring them in, so that they are informed and they know what's going on. You can say, you can set your coats over here, we have a coat check area. This is the food. We've got some vegetarian food over here and non-vegetarian food. We've got some drinks over here. Things of that nature, just to make people feel comfortable. And, the last thing that you want the person who's welcoming to do is say, "Do you have any questions?" Another thing that you might want to do is either make up flyers, or if you want to be really environmentally friendly, which I like, is have a big dry erase board or some sort of poster or something like that that's got your kind of timeline for your ritual, what you expect to do. So you're going to have the meet and greet. And then you're going to have a mythological round table, and then you're going to have a ritual. And then after that, you're going to do cakes and ale, and then you're going to, do a little speech about fundraising, and then everybody's going to go, and then or it's social time, whatever you want to do. But you want to make sure to do that stuff ahead of time, so that everybody's on the same page, and so you don't have to worry about it within your ritual space. I just want to make a small note on charging admission. Um, Now, sometimes it's necessary, especially if you had to pay a boatload of money to get the space that you're in. But always try to make it as affordable as possible. And if you don't have to charge admission, if your space was free and all you're really putting into is time, you know, make sure that you either make it free or very readily available to everybody. And this goes to accessibility too, because as pagans, a lot of us are young, we don't have a lot of money, and if you're charging a boatload for a ritual, a lot of people aren't going to come. You know, there's a lot of ways that you can deter people from doing ritual, and one of the big ones is if you're charging, a bunch of money. If you have to charge, do it on a sliding scale. So, in other words, $5 to $15, depending on what you can afford. Believe it or not, there are going to be people who will pay the 15 if they know they can afford it. Also, don't turn anyone away for lack of funds. Say, this is our suggested donation. We did have to pay for this space. Please, donate whatever you can so that we can do this again next year. But we're not going to turn anyone away for lack of funds, because we want to be accessible to the pagan community. I have another video. It's way old. It's like from 2008, where I talk about the 7 C's of ritual in depth. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, because I have another video on it. I'm just going to make a couple notes. Now, when you guys are doing your circling part, you can have one of your volunteers do that and go around with an athame. When you're doing your cleansing, for a large ritual cleansing, make sure that you just go around and have everybody saged. And remember that there's 3 steps to cleansing. You have to cleanse your area. You have to cleanse people, body and mind. Okay, so they need to cleanse their mind of all their distracting thoughts, and you need to cleanse their body, which is where the sage comes in. Okay, um, you want to make sure that when you're doing your calling, you can have volunteers call each one of the 4 elements. And it's kind of a really cool thing to be able to have people kind of express themselves in that way. And if you allow them that type of expression, they're going to come back and want to do a ritual with you again. So that's a really cool thing to do. And then of course you've got your ritual goal already done, but check out my 7 C's of ritual video. I'm going to put that video, I'm going to connect those 2 videos so that you can link it, or put a little thing in the annotation so that you guys can get to it easily. Now that you've done your ritual and it's been a success, now it's time for you to go on to having your food and mingling and social time, okay? Make sure to leave at least 45 minutes to an hour after ritual for social time. And it's important, you being the host of the ritual, to go around and meet as many of the people who attended your ritual as possible, so that, people know who you are and everything like that. And then after a little bit of social time, after everybody's had something to eat, you should call everybody's attention and tell them, hey, we had a really good time tonight. Let's do it again. And if you're in a group that's looking for donations, now is the time to hit people up, say, hey, if you've got any extra cash to spend, give us a donation. If you don't have any money right now, hit us up on our PayPal and stuff like that. There's nothing wrong with asking for it. But it's a little different when you ask for it or demand it. I've had money demanded from me before, and I'm much less giving of it when people demand it, when they ask for it and say, hey, we put up some money and we've got all this energy that we've put into this event. We would like a little bit of donations from you guys if you've got it available. And that's the best time to do it, is after people have said, okay, well, there's some value in this event. They put all this together and we've had such a great time. Let's do this more often. And make sure that, there's other groups present at your ritual and stuff like that, that you get together and do some things with those people and say, what else other things can we do besides rituals for the other pagans in our area? Earth Spirituals of Chicago used to have a pagan movie night that was a big success. I remember they did, what was one of the first movies they did? The Wicker Man. Of course, everybody loves the Wicker Man movie. But there's other movies that they put on as well. You'd be surprised how many pagan movies are out there. I mean, you can do fun stuff too, like Bed Moms at Brood Sticks and stuff like that. But you get the idea. But now that your ritual is done, make sure that you thank everybody involved. Make sure that you give credit to people who need to give credit to. If you had other groups come and help you out, make sure to promote their events. If they've got something a couple weekends from now, to say, hey, make sure to hit these group at their next ritual and stuff like that. And then if you say that you're going to be somewhere, make sure to follow through with that as well. Anyway, this video is long enough. I'm going to end it here, but if you've got any questions about creating events and stuff like that, please hit me up. I've got a lot of experience in this. I used to do it with big groups in Chicago, and I do it with smaller groups now, but I would love to share my expertise. Thank you guys, and blessed be.